He was 21 when he first told himself he had time. Time to figure things out. Time to start tomorrow. Time to become whoever he wanted to be. The world felt wide and forgiving, and he moved through it like someone who believed the clock would wait. He lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city, where the rent was cheap and the walls were thin. Every morning, his alarm went off at 7. Every morning, he silenced it and pulled the blanket back over his head. There was always a reason. He was tired. He'd had a long night. He deserved rest. And besides, what difference would one more day make? His friends were building things. One started a business. Another went back to school. A third took a job that demanded long hours but promised growth. He watched them from a distance, half admiring, half dismissive. They were stressing over nothing, he thought. Life wasn't a race. There was no prize for burning out early. So he chose ease. He worked part-time at a bookstore, just enough to pay rent and buy groceries. The rest of his hours dissolved into screens and distractions. He told himself he was recharging, gathering inspiration, waiting for the right moment to begin. The right moment never announced itself. At 23, he started noticing the gaps. His friends talked about projects and deadlines and things they were building. He had nothing to contribute except stories about shows he'd watched or games he'd beaten. The conversations grew shorter. The invitations became less frequent. He told himself they were just busy. He told himself it didn't matter. But it did. By 25, the comfort had curdled into something heavier. The apartment felt smaller. The part-time job felt like a cage. He started each day with the intention to change, to finally do something that mattered. But intention without action is just noise. And so the days kept passing, one after another, identical and forgettable. He tried sometimes. He'd sign up for an online course and watch the first 2 videos. He'd start writing a story and abandon it by page 3. He'd apply for a better job and then sabotage the interview with half-hearted answers. Every failure confirmed what he secretly believed, that he wasn't ready, that he needed more time. Time, he still thought, was on his side. At 27, something shifted. He saw an old classmate's name in the news. She'd published a book. Another friend bought a house. A third got promoted to a position that sounded important, the kind of title that meant something. He felt a strange hollowness in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy exactly. It was more like vertigo, the sudden awareness of how far behind he'd fallen. He told himself it didn't matter. Success wasn't everything. Happiness was what counted, and he was fine. Comfortable, free from stress and pressure and all the things that made other people miserable. But late at night, when the distractions ran out, he felt the weight of all the hours he'd let slip through his fingers, hours that had turned into days, days into years, and years into a decade he couldn't account for.
28 came and went, then 29. The part-time job became a full-time trap. The friends who'd once checked in stopped calling altogether. The apartment, once a temporary stop, became permanent. He looked around at the life he'd built and realized he hadn't built anything at all. He just existed, drifting from one moment to the next, assuming there would always be more. On the morning of his 30th birthday, he woke up before the alarm. The room was dim and quiet. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, he felt the full weight of what he'd done. Not in a single catastrophic mistake, but in 1,000 small surrenders. Every skipped morning, every abandoned plan, every hour spent waiting for a future that never required his participation. He thought about the years between 21 and 30, a full decade. The decade people said would define the rest of your life, and he'd spent it half asleep, convincing himself that time was infinite, that there would always be another chance, another day, another year. But time doesn't wait. It doesn't pause for second thoughts or late realizations. It just moves, indifferent and relentless, and what you don't use, you lose. He got out of bed and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, already awake, already moving. People going to jobs they'd worked years to earn. People building things he'd never started. People living lives he'd only ever planned. He couldn't go back. That was the cruelest part. He couldn't reclaim the mornings he'd wasted or the opportunities he'd ignored. He couldn't undo the comfort he'd chosen over effort, the ease he'd chosen over growth. The past was locked, unchangeable, a monument to his own carelessness. But he could start now. Not with grand declarations or desperate reinventions, not with promises he wouldn't keep, just with the simple, quiet acknowledgement that today was all he had. That the only time he could ever act in was this one. That waiting for the perfect moment was just another way of running out the clock. He didn't know if it was too late. Maybe it was. Maybe the damage was done, and 30 would become 40 the same way 21 had become 30. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he kept living the way he had been, he'd wake up at 40 with the same regret, only deeper, only sharper, only more unbearable. So he made a choice. Not to fix everything, not to become someone new overnight, just to stop pretending that time was something he could buy back, to stop treating today like a rehearsal for a life that would start later. Because later never comes, there's only now. And now, for better or worse, was all he had left. He turned away from the window and sat down at the desk he'd been avoiding for years. He opened a blank document. He didn't know what he was going to write, or if it would matter, or if anyone would ever read it. But he started anyway. Because the only thing worse than starting late is never starting at all.